I made a TMNT Shredder's Revenge themed arcade cabinet powered by a Nintendo Switch. It started life as a Gen 1 Street Fighter arcade 1-up cabinet. Here's how I did it. So I wanted to make this Shredder's Revenge themed Nintendo Switch arcade out of a used and inexpensive arcade 1-up cabinet. I checked Facebook Marketplace, ended up finding one the guy was asking $200 for. It was in rough cosmetic shape, but structurally it was sound, and I was going to change all the cosmetic stuff anyway, so I decided this would work just fine for me. I was going to order new graphics, control panel, anyway. So I checked and I found some other projects people had done before me with Nintendo Switches, but I decided on this Ninja Turtle theme. I just thought it looked pretty cool. So I ordered graphics from arcadegraphics.com, and it came with everything here. I didn't really care for the control deck overlay, so I decided something less colorful would look better. I found this first frame from the animated series and decided to use that as a custom graphic. So this is roughly what it would look like, and I like that. So I started taking the arcade cabinet apart and stripping everything I wasn't going to need. Next, I ordered the graphics and a Logitech PC powered subwoofer that would be used later to add a little bit of bass and power the built-in speakers and the Intec Switch control deck that I would be using for controls. Now, I've never heard of anyone using the Intec Switch control deck the way I have, so I'm going to explain exactly what I did. Its original intent is to be used as Bluetooth controllers for a Nintendo Switch to connect to a stock arcade 1-up monitor. That's not exactly what I was going to do here. I'm not using a stock monitor. I'm using a 20-inch Dell aftermarket monitor. Now, the included PCB to connect the Switch Intec control deck to a stock monitor is not something I'm going to be using. So all my control deck is going to be is a couple of Pro controllers. Now, there are micro USB ports on the control deck that, according to everything I've read from Intec and seen on YouTube from others who have used the deck, these ports are just used for updates, and I've never even heard of an update that you can actually get and apply. So I'm not sure that anyone's really used them for anything. Now, if you take USB-A to micro USB cables, you can use the Intec deck as a wired Pro controller. I've heard some people saying that the Bluetooth connection had lag. This eliminates that. I don't know if the Bluetooth connection's laggy. I never really used it. I just use mine wired. So the only reason for me to choose the Intec Switch deck is simply because it works with the Switch and it fits this arcade cabinet perfectly with no modifications necessary. There are a couple of caveats to this. The built-in speakers in the Intec deck aren't going to play any audio because I'm not feeding it an HDMI signal. So here's how I handled the audio situation. I bought a wire from Amazon that's just speaker wire with a 3.5mm jack on one end. I spliced the end into the left and right speakers inside the Intec control deck. Then I plugged the 3.5mm end of the jack into the powered output on that subwoofer. Next, I took a 3.5mm cable, plugged into the headphone jack on the Switch and the other end on the input side of that powered subwoofer. So now the powered subwoofer amplifies the Intec stock speakers and the subwoofer plays audio. Then I took two micro USB cables to USB-A cables and plugged them in to a USB hub, which is plugged into the Switch dock. I did this so I'd have two spare USB ports in case I wanted to connect any other wired controllers later. Instead of running an HDMI cable from the Switch dock directly to a DVI adapter for my monitor, I ran HDMI to that HDMI switch there, then an HDMI to DVI cable from the HDMI switch. The reason I did this is DVI isn't HDCP compatible, so therefore trying to use an HDMI cable plugged into the switch dock to a DVI plug to go into my monitor's input, you won't be able to watch YouTube on this cabinet if you decide you wanted to. But the HDMI switch is HDCP compliant, so that's the reason I put that in there. It also gives you the ability to add other consoles inside the cabinet and have them all plugged into the HDMI switch simultaneously connected to your monitor if you wanted to. That may be an option in the future. I just mainly did it so that if you wanted to be able to watch YouTube on this cabinet, it works. For easy access getting in and out of the cabinet without having to use screws, I used these rare earth magnets I got on Amazon, super glued them to the back of the cabinet as well as on the inside where the back cover makes contact. This way you can just gently close the back of the cabinet and these rare earth magnets grab on and it keeps it held securely, but it's easy to just pull open when you need to go in there to mess with something. I bought a set of Govee LED light strips to go on the back. It comes with this included wired controller that lets you change settings, brightness, and power. It also includes this little remote control. I just velcroed it to the back of the cabinet. Inside the cabinet, I used a splitter that came with my lit marquee so that the single Govee power source would power the LEDs on the back as well as the lit marquee, and the power source for the Govee is just plugged into a power strip in the bottom of the cabinet. Inside of the cabinet, I routed a portion of the LED strip lights to the underside of the control deck so that it illuminates the front art a little bit. The camera doesn't really do it justice. It looks pretty cool in person. So I mentioned the lit marquee uses the same power source utilizing a splitter. The only difference is there's a little toggle switch in line to separately control the marquee. I just drilled a small hole in the back and put the switch in there. Going back to the rear of this thing one more time. So this is an Intec Gaming Switch dock mount for Arcade 1-Up. Now I know I put the back cover on the Arcade upside down. I just did this so that the dock would be up high instead of down low, just to make it more accessible. This thing attached to the switch dock is a game card switcher. It lets you load up 4 physical games and then plug the device itself into the Switch's game card slot so that you can have 4 physical games ready at any given time and swap between them with a button press. The LED on the button changes colors to indicate which game card is currently being read by the Switch. This thing also included a little wireless button that you can stick somewhere so that you don't have to walk up to the Switch if it's connected to your TV or spin this thing around or reach behind it to change which game card is being read. Since my collection is mostly physical games, I thought this was kind of cool and it was pretty inexpensive. I'll leave links to everything I've got on here in the description, by the way. Now there's one thing that the Intec Switch control deck can't do, regardless if you hook it up the way I have or its original intended way. It's unable to wake the Switch when it's asleep. Now every YouTuber I've seen with this control deck has recommended using Joy-Con, a Pro controller, to connect just for the purpose of waking the Switch up. And that works, but I don't want to sync a controller just for that purpose. So here's what I did. There's a couple other options for waking the Switch up. You can reach around the back and press the power button on the Switch itself, which wakes the tablet, then start pressing buttons on the control deck. It connects and you got control of the Switch. No need for a separate controller just to wake it. If you've got this physical game cart switcher like I have, you can press the remote button that switches the carts to wake it up, then start pressing buttons on the control deck. And that works too. When it comes time to put it to sleep, you can just press and hold the home button. A menu pops up, giving you the option for sleep mode. Press A, and it goes to sleep. The other downside to doing it this way is the power switch on the Intec deck doesn't work. More on that later, because I have an idea how I might could make it work. I'm just not sure it's worth the trouble. Here's the control deck graphic overlay again. I got it from GameOnGraphics.com from the first frame of the animated intro. I thought it would look pretty cool. I like how it turned out. I like it better than the colorful one that came with the other graphics. And I got these joystick ball tops from eBay in purple to replace the black ones that came with the deck, and I got the pizza dust covers from Etsy. So back to what I said earlier about the stock power button on the Intec deck not working. I have an idea that I think in theory would make the power button work. I just don't know that it's worth the trouble. But here's what I was thinking. There's a setting in the Switch settings menu that you can set to make the Switch wake when the charging cable is unplugged. This also happens when you lift the Switch tablet out of the dock. So when power's removed, the Switch wakes. Now, I was thinking you could splice the USB-C Switch dock power wire into this power button on the Intec Switch deck. It wouldn't work like a traditional on-off power button, but you could label the on side of the switch charge and the off side of the switch wake. Doing this, when you move the switch to wake, it would disconnect the power, the switch would wake. Whenever you switch that switch back to charge or on position, your Switch tablet would receive power and it would stay charged. You wouldn't be able to put to sleep this way, but this would be a way to use the stock button to wake it, in theory anyway. I'm just not sure it's worth the trouble. That's pretty much it for how I put this thing together. If I'm forgetting anything or if you have any questions, leave it in the comments and I'll try to answer as best I can. And I'll leave you with a few more shots of the cabinet and some of the games that I have on here that play well on here with the control deck. Basically anything that doesn't require a right analog stick is good to go, but some style of games are just more comfortable and fun to play on an arcade machine versus a controller, and vice versa. So thanks for watching and see you later.